Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 17, Verse 6. Yastam Krishna gate duram Saha Gandhiva Danvana Sochosya Sochan Rahasi Praharan Avadam Arhasi. Translation: You rogue, do you dare beat an innocent cow because Lord Krishna and Arjuna, the carrier of the Gandiva bow, are out of sight? Since you are beating the innocent in a secluded place, you are considered a culprit and therefore deserve to be killed. Purport: in civilization where God is conspicuously banished and there is no devotee warrior like Arjuna, the associates of the age of Kali take advantage of this lawless kingdom and arrange to kill innocent animals like the cow in secluded slaughterhouses. Such murderers of animals stand to be condemned to death by the order of a pious king like Maharaj Parikshit. For a pious king, the culprit who kills an animal in a secluded place is punishable by the death penalty, exactly like a murderer who kills an innocent child in a secluded place. Here, Parikshit is indicating the crime that Kali has committed. And that is that he is beating the innocent in a secluded place. So if a person is innocent, obviously they should not in any way get harmed or punished. And moreover, this is done in a secret place where nobody can see it. So the person himself is doing it and understanding that there's something wrong with it, but he's hiding it from other people. He's hiding his crime. And therefore he says, you deserve to be killed, Vadamarhasi. So, punishment is due to a person because they've done some wrong. But who decides what is wrong and what is the punishment? So this is a bit of a controversy. What is right and what is wrong, and then if it is wrong, how much punishment do we give? So it's, we could say, somewhat arbitrary what we choose. At the same time, we do see that there are some common standards in all civilizations and in the laws of country around the world. For instance, you don't kill people, human beings. So that's a common one. You don't unlawfully cheat them, you don't steal, etc. And there's some common things in around the world, even in the secular society. And then within religions, again, we find the same type of common rules mentioned. So there is some standard. And they also give punishments for different things. The country will have its punishments for what type of crime. And then we have more details given by the judge. He will take different cases previously and examine them and then give you a sentence based upon previous cases plus the law. And then we have the religious texts. The different countries, the religions of the world will have their punishments for different things. And thus we have in Manu Smriti and other Smriti Shastras what is the crime and what is the punishment. And they give very exact details, so, some of which are very harsh, such as cutting your hands cut off or something like that. And that's a Muslim one, I think, isn't it? Muslim one, get your hands cut off for being a thief. But we have equally harsh ones even in the Manu Smriti. And there's also tests of innocence even. If there's a doubt, did he commit the crime or did he not commit the crime? So then they have pariksha test. So of course in the modern world they have trials and then they present evidence and witnesses, like that's modern system. Maybe they did that in ancient times also, but one of the tests is the test by fire. So they take a they take an iron ball and put it in the fire till it's red hot. Then then the guilty or so-called guilty person has to hold the iron ball and walk for 10 steps. And if it doesn't burn him, he's innocent. If he gets burned, he's guilty. That's one prediction, one test. Yeah, I think that's in Bhanu Swami. So it's a pretty harsh test. Remarkably also, I think in Africa they do have that test. If they can't figure out who stole the cow or something like that, they line up all the young men there and they have to stick out their tongue and they get a sword and they heat it up till it's red hot and they stick it on everybody's tongue. And the one that gets burned, he's the guilty one. Of course, usually he runs away also. He tries to run away, then they figure he's the guilty one. So, and similar tests in other places. So anyway, there's different rules given in scriptures or in law of a country for who's guilty of what crime and then how much punishment they should get. But we see there is some difference in some places also. Okay? Who gets punished for what. So this gives rise to a little bit of a controversy, who's got the better laws. Of course, country-wise, it's more or less similar, except some have harsher laws for drugs, let's say, than others. But it comes to a little more extreme where we find the rules of the country and then the rules of Scripture. We'll find more discrepancy. And then we'll find discrepancy between one scripture of one religion and another religion, what is considered to be a sin. And then we get a more complexity because we'll find in the Varnashram system, then according to the Varnas, the Brahmins have more things to be sinful about than the Sudras. They got more rules to follow. They break this one, they're a criminal, but where if you're a Sudra, you don't get any punishment for it. So it's very complex how to decide who gets punished for what. But we see that the Varnashram system is rather unique because according to the qualification of the person, they get different punishments. Maybe it's always a crime, but it's more punishable the higher you go and the more knowledge you have. Therefore, you're more guilty of the crime, whatever like that. So there's a consideration of qualification as well. And then we come to some very great differences in scriptures. And now we'll find, particularly in the Vedic scriptures, we'll have much higher standards of non-violence than we have in other countries or in other scriptures of the world. So there is some degree of non-violence everywhere. Don't hit people unnecessarily, don't kill them. So we have rules to keep people under control. So it's common. And in religion also, thou shalt not kill in the Bible, etc. So common rules are there. But we see in the Vedic literature then this idea of ahimsa or non-violence gets carried not just to human beings, but to animals and plants as well. So it's like a more comprehensive type of non-violence, which is also, if we look at it logically, it's reasonable also. That there's degrees of life, etc. So we have to respect all life, and therefore we shouldn't unnecessarily commit violence against any living being. Right. So this is, we could say, a superior type of vision. So therefore we'll find in different religions and in different systems, the country rules of countries, etc., a wide variety of what is right and what is wrong. It's quite different. So what do we go by? Which system do we go by? So it's a matter of faith. You have to choose which system you're going to follow. We cannot argue with the state. If we're in one country, we have to follow the rules. But as far as religion, we have a little freedom, so then we can choose which principles we're going to follow, what is sinful and what is not sinful. And we choose. But if we look at the Vedic concept of what is considered to be sinful and not sinful, then we find it's much more sophisticated and much more, let's say, even reasonable or logical in its presentation of what is violence and then how it extends to all the living forms, but then again is more punishable if it's a higher form of life than the lower form of life. And among human beings, again, there's categories of human beings, and more punishable if you kill a Brahmana than if you kill a Sudra or a Mlech or whatever like that. So it has it's a much more logical type of a system which includes all life forms. So in that sense, we can say it's more comprehensive in its a view of what is considered to be sinful or wrong. This, of course, is on one level. That's the level of dharma, what is right and what is wrong, what is punishable, etc., which is, we can say, material. And dharma is to regulate people in the material world to minimize the violence and raise them to a higher consciousness. So that's what dharma is for, the regular dharma in the material world. Yet we see that the Vedic system is more, let's say, detailed and sophisticated and reasonable than other systems. As well as this, then we have the other law, and that's the law of karma, which is, religions will have a kind of a law like that. Yes, the law of God is also there, besides the law of the country. But the law of karma extends not just one lifetime, it extends over many lifetimes as well. And all of your acts give a result. And you are responsible for your acts, and if you do the sinful acts, then you get punishment for it. So we get the punishment due to the law of karma as well as the punishment due to the state. This is a compensation factor. If the country does not figure out what crimes you've done, then the law of karma will figure it out, give you the punishment anyway. So you can never escape the punishment. So that's the law of karma. So that's a added type of scale. But for the human being, then he has to understand what is sinful so he can avoid it. So we need the more detailed list of what is considered to be a sin. And that's why we have the Vedic literature. It gives us more details about what is considered to be the bad activities and what you're going to get punished for and what result you're going to get for it. So in that sense, it's better for our well-being if we know more details about what's punishable and what's not punishable. So in this way, we have a very detailed system. Of course, as I said, it's material. It is dealing with papa and punya, law of karma, and the rules of the state for getting another birth in this material world, basically, and living, avoiding the sin and doing the opposite, punya, and therefore living comfortably in this world. So in that sense, material. But the system is also linked to spiritual life. It cannot be separated. The Varnashram system cannot be separated from Supreme Lord. So we call the regular system Dharma, and then we call that relationship with the Lord Parodharma, or the Supreme Dharma. So even if it is indirect, this system, and is dealing with the material world, it has a link to the Supreme Lord. He's ultimately in control of the law of karma. He is the maker of the rules of society. And if we follow those rules properly and have faith in the Lord, then we get good results. So therefore we have a more detailed system of what is the crime and what is the punishment in the Vedic system than in other systems of crime in the world, whether it's religious or secular. But there's always complications. It's not cut and dried. There are different conditions under which things happen, which may make a person innocent when it looks like he's guilty, etc. And that's why we have law courts, because a crime is not always a crime under certain cases, or it becomes less of a crime, or whatever. So even if the person did something, there are circumstances under which the person is not guilty, maybe innocent like that. So that's why they have law courts also in many countries of the world. If it's cut and dried, fine, then it's just, chop the hand off, whatever like that, and that's it. Everybody gets their hand chopped off. But usually there is some sort of little court in between to judge what is the seriousness of the punishment, and accordingly You may not get your hand chopped off, you may get your finger chopped off, or get a fine instead, or whatever, as we do in normal countries, in the world. They have various types of punishment, depending on the intention behind it. Therefore, there is some flexibility in this law also. But the human being cannot really figure it out, because we can go back and forth, and we have big debates about things like abortion, and there's pluses and minuses on both sides, and everything is very, very confusing for people. What is the actual standard? It's very, very difficult for people. Save the mother, save the child, or whatever. It's difficult. So that's where Scripture, of course, has a value, Vedic Scripture, because it actually gives respect to all life. So that we have to use that as our standard for judging what is right and what is wrong. Nevertheless, we can also make a mistake. So ultimately, the law of karma is there, and Yamaraj is a better judge than we are. So he'll give you your just punishment. If you do get that punishment, you'll get that punishment. If the law gave you the correct punishment, then you don't have to get Yamaraj's punishment. But if the law didn't do it right, then Yamaraj gets another chance to retry you, and then you get more punishment or whatever like that. So there's a safeguard there with the law of karma also. But as far as the society is concerned, then ultimately the judges are there, and then the king is there. So the king has an important role to play there on how to institute the laws properly in the country. And then he has to make sure that the judges are not corrupt, and that they are knowledgeable, and they're doing their duty according to principles, etc. And if they don't do it properly, then the whole system fails, and wrong people get punished for the wrong crimes and whatever like that. So the king has to be knowledgeable of Dharma. What are the principles and how they should be applied? What is the basic principle upon which we judge things in difficult cases, etc. So one has to be highly qualified to be the king or the ruler. Here, Parikshit mentions Krishna and Arjuna. So obviously Krishna is Supreme Lord, so there's no argument with him being the final judge of everything. And Arjuna is the friend of Krishna, so they're in a very special position to properly implement everything and make sure that if there's punishment, the correct punishment is given. We cannot question that at all. They are the highest authority. So, on the other hand, if they're gone, then what happens? If that authority is not there, we don't have trust in the authority anymore, what to do. And that's where we'll get all sorts of problems. You may not trust the king, you may not trust the judges, you may not trust the policeman, you may not trust, so then you feel free to do whatever you want because you don't have any respect for them. So again, we get lawlessness. So there has to be a stable system with a trust in the leader, trust in the law system, trust in the judicial system, trust in the police force, trust in the army, etc. There has to be that trust there. Otherwise, people are going to be dissatisfied, and the country will not run properly. So here, Arjuna and Krishna had left, and Parikshit was now in charge. So perhaps Kali was thinking, well, Krishna's no longer here, I can do whatever I want. And that's true. But now that Krishna's gone, then Kali Yuga started. So after Krishna's departure, then that's the beginning of Kali Yuga. So in one sense he's right. Yes, Krishna's gone, so therefore Kali Yuga can do whatever he wants. But Parikshit was there. So the whole battle of Kurukshetra was fought and supported by Krishna and fought by the Pandavas to put the Pandavas on the throne. And then all their children were killed, and the only one left was Parikshit. So then he was the treasure that they had to raise to take over. And when they left, as described in the previous chapters, then Parikshit took control. So he was also highly qualified, you can say empowered by Krishna to do his job. So actually there was no worry that there was unqualified people there. He was very, very qualified. Still, Kali tries to do his work, at least attempts to do something here. Therefore Parikshit, as our previous verse talked about, he had a thundering voice in which he began to chastise Kali. So in other words, he had the authority. And we see from his statements that very intelligent. He could understand what is the right thing, what is the wrong thing, what is breaking the law, what is the punishment for breaking the law, etc. Here he makes the decision. You have to be killed. That's the immediate thing. You're killing the innocent, therefore be killed. So here it is a cow and a bull. He is doing violence to a cow and a bull. They're not human. So most of the countries have laws for the human being. So if you kill an innocent human being, obviously, then you get the death penalty, or you get thrown in jail for 60 years or whatever, depending on the intentions or whatever. But here we have Parikshit defending the cow and the bull, which is a little unique. He said in the law court we don't have. Well, maybe we do. The people that cruelty to animals, maybe they take them to court also nowadays. You're persecuting your dog or something. Cruelty to your dogs, your pets. So we'll take your pet away from you and punish you, fine you. So a little bit like that. But they haven't got to the cow yet. Maybe the dog and the cat, but not to the cow, I think. So we have a wholesale slaughter. The Prophet says here, secretly they put it in the slaughterhouse where you don't see it. And they kill it all, and then they package the meat in the supermarket, so you don't see the violence involved. But actually it's very violent. So it is done secretly, more or less. But according to the Vedic system, it is unnecessary violence. System is such that, the Vedic system, that yes, people can eat meat in certain circumstances. But the higher you go in the system, the more sinful it is to do that. So the ideal system there is no meat. And then for the lower varnas, yes, they can in some circumstances. So the Kshatriya goes out hunting, and then he can take that meat or whatever. Or if they offer it to Kali, they can take the meat. So there are some cases under which they can do it. Under restrictions, they can. But the higher principle is there that for advancing spiritually, that no meat, no violence at all. And then, of course, even in circumstances, unavoidable circumstances, even if there's a brahmana and he's starving to death, then he could eat some meat or whatever. So there's a little bit of flexibility there also. Nevertheless, we have to understand the principle behind it, that we're trying to minimize the violence in this material world. And the more advanced you are in your consciousness, then the more you will follow that principle. So in the Varnashram system, the Brahmana is the highest, so he's expected to follow that principle. But superior to the Brahmana is the Vaishnava. So he's even higher than the Brahmana. So we see the Brahmanas were involved in animal sacrifices, sacrifice a horse, sacrifice a cow, or whatever like that. But then we say this is all karma kanda, and it's for ritual and elevation of heavenly planets. So the Vaishnavas reject that also. It's useless, and we shouldn't do those sacrifices also. So therefore, the Vaishnava standard is even higher than the Brahminical standard in one sense. We're trying to advance in spiritual life that's the main principle, and we're going beyond punyas only for spiritual life. So therefore, we have a higher set of standards. The difficulty comes in how to institute your standards, because as Krishna says, everybody's of different qualification, and therefore they should have different standards. So that's what we find in the Varnashram system, different standards for different Varnas, whatever. So as Vaishnavas are the highest standards, so then the question will come, wow, can we institute our principles on everybody? Is it possible? Or is it even advisable? Because they're different. They're not of the same qualification. Can we do it or not? So that's a debatable question. It's certainly preferable, but whether it is possible to do even is another question. Because if people are in a lower consciousness, how can they follow? It's impossible for them. So you're telling them to do something impossible, like telling a Sudra to study the Vedas, like that. So it's a question we have to think about very carefully, how far we can institute our principles for everybody in society when there are such a wide variety of persons. For that reason, they've had in the Varnashram system, whenever they've had various Varnas with various rules, and they've also had various systems for various people. So you have karma yoga on the bottom, in which you worship devatas, get material results, and even have animal sacrifices or whatever like that. And then that's for the lowest level. Then above that we have jnana, which rejects all of this, and then finally we have bhakti. So we have different spiritual systems for different types of people as well. Okay? So what do we do as devotees? Do we want to enforce the spiritual system on everybody? Everybody follow all the principles, etc. Or do we start at the bottom and institute a Varnashram system? And okay, the Sudras at the bottom, they can do a little more sense gratification. If you get the Vaishya, then less, and then Kshatriya less, and then Brahmana very little, and then finally get the Vaishnava at the top. So we have a separate system for us and a separate system for society. Yes or no, we don't know. But then the whole problem here is that in Kali Yuga, very difficult to have that system because there is no king. Parikshit is gone. After them, then the king started declining for 1,000 years, and then 12th canto says in Bhagavatam, after the Kurukshetra war, then 1,400 years, or 200 years, or 400 years later, that's what Kali Yuga gets very strong. So that was actually 1,000 years, 2,000 years before Christ, almost maybe 1,000 years before Christ or something. It is already bad then. So what to speak of 2,000 years after Christ? Very bad. So system very difficult to do. So these are the problems we have in modern society. As far as the society is concerned, very, very difficult to figure out what to do with society as a whole. But the other solution is that bhakti is independent of that system. So all we can do is encourage people to do bhakti. And if they can't at least do bhakti, at least chant the holy name, which everybody can do. Even if they're not qualified for bhakti, they can at least hear the name or whatever. And by that, then they can change their qualification. So as we see, by chanting the holy name once, you destroy all your karmas, and the person who's a malacha can end up as doing what a brahmana does. Of course, he's beyond that. So therefore, qualification can also change. Normally, in the Varnashram system, they don't consider that. You're just stuck there for your life. But with the chanting of the holy name and bhakti, then you can transcend all of your lower qualifications and come to the highest qualification immediately. So maybe that is what we have to institute. The quick way of getting to the highest qualification is through chanting the holy name. Once you're there, then you can follow everything. So, and then whatever is in Dharma is also included within Bhakti. So therefore, those who are performing Bhakti nicely, then they're automatically following all the rules of Dharma which are favorable for Bhakti. So then society can go on nicely. Okay, any questions?
On this point of capital punishment, I think there's a push in most countries, they want to ban it. There's just a few that are still maintaining it. So there's, I guess, different arguments, but one argument is that having capital punishment will be a deterrent to commit serious crimes, but at the same time, statistics show that, like in the US, some states have capital punishment and some don't, but the murder rate is the same.
Okay.
So they say that it's not a deterrent anyway,
Okay.
But from a Vedic point of view, it seems that capital punishment is recommended. So how does that benefit the soul if they're given capital punishment?
So if someone actually is guilty, that they have done a crime in full consciousness with malicious motives and they killed a person, then yes, then it is, that person gets killed. Now if you don't kill them, and you give them a light punishment for some reason or other due to the law of the country, the skill of your lawyer or whatever, You're going to get the punishment anyway by Yamaraj and your next body. Somewhere it's going to come out. Either Yamaraj gets you or your next body you're going to get the karma. So either way. So then in the Vedic system, the law court and the system of Dharma takes care of it, so Yamaraj doesn't have to do it later on. Or you don't have to get suffering in your future life. It takes care of that for you. That's the logic behind that. Okay?
I think Bhagavad Prabhupada mentions that if a jiva is inflicted capital punishment by the executive head, they become purified of their sins and they achieve the heavenly planets. Yeah,
well, they get rid of that particular crime, so that's not a punishment for that. Therefore, they're free in that sense. Yeah. Or maybe the other argument against capital punishment is sometimes you condemn the wrong person. So you may be innocent, but that's the imperfection of the law system or the the trial system. It may not work properly in some cases also. So the innocent person gets punished.
But could you say if the so-called innocent person gets punished, that must be their karma still somehow or other, or?
Not necessarily. We can say this is some, maybe it's a kind of a group karma, because the person who punishes them gets real bad karma for that, isn't it? And the people who act as witnesses against them, they may get real bad karma also. So it's like, let's say in this lifetime we're creating bad effects also, karmas or whatever. We're creating some minor things in this lifetime by our very acts.
Well, I mean, if they're actually innocent but they get killed, maybe they were destined to be killed anyway. But
possibly by something else, probably could be there also. Yeah.
Yesterday I was listening on the radio and you distinguish between simple activities and reactions and aparadha or offences. So under whose jurisdiction is aparadha taken care of? And also, like for example, as in a devotee community, maybe you may find whether it's a male or female who's kind of harassing another devotee. And then also I've heard a while ago, I heard one very horrific case where one devotee, he was, in the old days, he was abusing the children and then he committed suicide by burning himself, saying that, the only way I'll be absolved is by fire or something. So I couldn't really understand that. That's also committing Vaishnava path because it's a devotee as well as killing himself. And so under whose jurisdiction does aparadha come under and how is it taken care of and dealt with?
Well, aparadhas are, we can say, devotional sins. The regular sins are violence against other living entities in general who are not devotees, or against animals or plants or human beings. So any type of violence is considered to be a sin. Aparadha is a violence against a devotee or against the Lord or against the process of bhakti. That is considered to be the aparadha. So it's a sin in one sense, but it's devotional sin involving devotional service. So therefore it's both. You hit a devotee or you hit a person in the material world. Okay, it's a sin, but it's also a devotee, so you get worse results for that devotion to the aparadha sin. Of course, it's a sin in the normal sense, plus it's an extra one because it's a devotee of the Lord, so that you get worse effects from that. We can say that as far as it's a sin, then it goes through the regular channels of Yamaraj and whatever like that. As far as bhakti is concerned, it's serious because bhakti is the internal Shakti of Krishna. These other papa and punya has got nothing to do with Krishna directly. It has to do with material energy and all that, but and the jiva. But bhakti actually is the Sarup Shakti of Krishna in the jivas. So when we harm that jiva who's got the bhakti, then it's an offense against the Supreme Lord also. So it's much more serious because of that. So therefore we can say the aparad is not so much, it involves the Dharma also because it's violence, but then it also involves the Supreme Lord because he's in charge of bhakti. So then we have another personality involved there, not just the Yamaraj. We got Supreme Lord involved personally in that.
What about killing snakes?
If they're not, if they're non-poisonous, then we can be friendly with them.
Understand that they're poisonous or not. So what's the procedure?
Well, I guess we have to be careful of them. It's just like maybe a tiger. If you're with a tiger, obviously, and he's trying to kill you, you can have violence back to defend yourself. But then also we don't just go out and try to kill all the tigers just because tigers sometimes attack human beings. So the same with the snakes. If they're not harming us in any way, then we don't bother with them. If they're poisonous, then we have to take care. Maybe we get rid of them somehow, transport them somewhere else. They have, in some places, they have the poisonous snake catchers, and they catch your snake and they take them away and put them somewhere else.
Is there any particular reference in the scriptures you can
well, I think it's the snake and the scorpion are considered to be envious, so therefore because they will attack you without your doing anything to them, they'll attack you. So therefore, you have a right to attack them first.
With regards to crime and punishment, the Vedic system lays it down quite succinctly, but it's also based on the fact that it's understood that most the citizens that live under the Vedic system know about the laws of karma anyway, it's there. So relatively speaking, in our modern society that we have today, there is no knowledge of that. Even coming from a Christian religion, there's still the tenets of the commandments and that, but still not clear understanding the laws of karma. So it's come down to the fact where the societies we live in today, they sort of value human life as it is the only life that we're ever going to have, and who knows what's going to happen afterwards. So they adjust the crime accordingly, or the punishment accordingly. It's like, for instance, in Sweden, I've heard that the jails in Sweden are like
free.
first-class hotels or something like that.
Yeah.
Living there. And even, most of the jails now, they've got, all the comforts there, the television, everything like that. It's just according to the society.
Yeah.
Whereas, previously, for those people who understood the Vedic injunctions and they knew that if they committed a crime, then, the death sentence might be imminent, and that was sort of written into the equation for those people who committed the crime. They had more of understanding of life and death than what there is now, so punishments according.
So what, you're in favor of death penalty?
No, not really. It's just like, just mentioning that in society today, people are more sensitive to life. And that's how it is.
For human beings, but not others.
Yeah. That's exactly right. So human beings. There is one incident, I'm just thinking of one, it's probably relative. It's like a person, Australia, was sentenced to death in Indonesia.
Drugs.
Yeah, 10 years ago. 6 of them actually. And 4 of them carried out the sentence, right? Yeah. Hue and cry in Australia about how it's not fair that they're being sentenced to death. And it dragged on for a while, and one of the guys who was like the kingpin, he was a real mean person, but then in jail he completely did like a Valmiki or something. He became a very sensitive person and helped everybody and stuff like that. But still, the sentence was the sentence, and he was still executed. So that's the laws there. So that's under the Sharia law or whatever. So
It's relevant to sort of the consciousness of the society, I guess. One can maybe look in other places, but if people don't understand the death penalty, then it sort of creates a whole other.
Yeah, I think probably the reason for that is because the serious effects of the drugs in those countries, so therefore it's very strict. Well, not just there, Malaysia is the same. They give you a warning in the country when you come in that if you have drugs, it's death penalty, be very careful. Still they don't follow it, yeah, people. They try to get around it, so then they get the results. So, I mean, there's a little bit of lack of intelligence there, and greed for money. So, and ultimately it's their bad karma, or their, you know, the result of their own individual choices that they're in that position. So, they're being warned ahead of time, and still they do it. Which means that people, for some people, the death penalty threat does not work. They'll do the crime anyway, even if this is a death penalty, they'll do it if they can get away with it. You know? So it's not a big threat to them, the death penalty. So that's why some countries, maybe they get rid of the death penalty on that count, as he said. Just because a death penalty doesn't mean it stops the people doing murders or anything. It doesn't really stop it. But the Vedic system probably is that we're just doing implementing the law of karma for Yamaraj, that's all. Yeah. Which is, you know, kind of the basic religion, like eye for eye, tooth for tooth, is that type of logic in terms of karma, which is prevalent in most ancient cultures probably. That's their system, a very similar type of system. Okay, Hare Krishna.